20 years ago on 9/11, the FAA was at the epicenter of trying to explain and respond to a plane crash into the Twin Towers and the realization that passenger jets had been hijacked. Two former FAA leaders recount their experiences on that day and how it changed the agency. Gregg Dvorak is Chief Commercialization Officer at Airspace Operations Platform Airio. On 9/11, he was Director for Operational Support for the National Airspace System. Terry Biggio is a Senior Director at SAIC. 20 years ago, he was the FAA's Operations Manager at the Boston Center. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Thank you, Mimi.
Gregg, you were based in D.C., but you were actually in Boston giving a speech that day. Tell us about how the day unfolded for you.
Yeah, I was giving a talk on, of all things, configuration and control of software for the air traffic control system. And one of my assistants came up to me and said, hey, something happened in New York City. We need to go take a look at this. And my organization was responsible for the air traffic control system, the actual operating system. So anytime that there was a crash, we immediately became involved because we need to make sure that the system didn't play a role in the crash. So we happened to be in a hotel that day. So we went to the lobby and we met and we started to talk to our team about what just happened. Because at that moment, we didn't know what size aircraft flew into the tower. We didn't know the impact of what happened at the tower. And at that same time, the news was on in the lobby, so we did get to see the second plane hit. And so as soon as we saw that, we knew immediately that this is much bigger than anything we've ever seen, and that it was not due to a system error or system anomaly. This was something much bigger.
And Terry, where were you on 9/11? What was happening for you that morning?
Sure, Mimi. So for me, I was at Boston Center, which is actually in Nashua, New Hampshire. The center is where our air traffic controllers provide air traffic control services. And Boston Center is a facility with about 350 controllers, 30 radar scopes. We had about 70 controllers working that day, and our operation was running smoothly. It was a nice sky blue, clear VFR day that we expected to just be a normal operation for us.
And then when the first plane hit, what happened?
So for us, it happened much sooner than that. So about 8:24 in the morning, we realized that we had the hijack, and we were processing that hijack and trying to make sure that we got the word out to the rest of the FAA through our command center in Virginia to let
Terry,
them know that
how did you know you had a hijack situation?
Sure. So we learned that we had a hijack situation that started with one of our controllers had tried to contact American 11. American 11 was unresponsive. Right after that, the transponder, which is a device that we track on radar that allows us to get speed and altitude of American 11, that was turned off. And shortly thereafter, we heard a series of 3 transmissions over 10 minutes where the hijacker thought that he was transmitting to the passengers in the back, but he was actually transmitting over our air traffic control frequency, which gave us the heads up as to what we were facing.
And what did you hear him say?
So the first transmission we didn't hear right away, and that was important to us because that was the transmission where Muhammad Atta led off with, "We have planes," as in plural. So that was not caught initially. We had to go back and pull the tape, which at that time was a large cassette tape, which is about 1 inch wide, 14 tracks, to try to dig that up. But there were 2 other transmissions that followed where the hijacker is trying to keep the airplane calm. Don't anybody move, don't do anything stupid, we're going back to the airport. It wasn't until about 9 o'clock in the morning when American 11 had already hit the World Trade Center, United 175 had just hit the Trade Center, and we had heard on the tape where the hijacker said that we have planes. So we didn't know if we had 2, did we have 3, did we have 4, did we have 5, but we knew we had a significant problem.
And you also knew that this wasn't your typical hijacking situation where the hijackers make demands and you have to respond to that.
Yeah, so initially on our frequency, and what they thought was going out back to the rest of the airplane was about, they're going to make demands when they get to the airport. Normal hijacks, if there are normal hijacks, would normally go to an airport, land, and then make those demands. In this particular case, we had no idea that they would be using an airliner as a weapon.
And Terry, at what point does the center back here in the Washington area say, bring all the planes down?
Sure. So when you put everything in a series, all the data points matter. The 3 transmissions from American 11 and then hitting the World Trade Center, United 175, American 77 actually came within 6 miles of the White House before it turned around and went back to the Pentagon. But it was about 9 o'clock in the morning when those pieces came together, in which we knew that we had more than one, but we had no idea as to the scale. And it was about 44 minutes after the second aircraft hit the World Trade Center that's when we started to land airplanes.
Gregg, let me ask you about the fighter jets that were scrambled. This would happen in the event of a hijacked passenger jet. Tell us what happened and what went into that decision.
Well, the decision to actually do a scramble is more on Terry's side. What ended up happening with me is shortly after 9/11, within a week, I found myself working with the military on behalf of the FAA administrator, enabling the Air Force the opportunity to see and talk to their fighter jets as they made those scrambles around the country. Prior to 9/11, when they scrambled the jet was under FAA control, and that wouldn't suffice for the decisions that fighter jet had to make, or the pilot and the fighter jet.
But Gregg, how could an Air Force fighter jet be under the control of the FAA? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, in the United States at that time, the military's system, air traffic control system, only looked outward from our borders. So there was a ring around the United States, but there was a hole in the middle. So inside the United States, the military could not see their own fighter jets or talk to their own fighter jets. That was all done through the FAA. And that turned out to be a problem that had to be corrected.
Because it would be essentially a military general telling the FAA, could you talk to my pilot and tell him to take down this passenger jet?
That's true. They stood up an operation called Operation Noble Eagle shortly after 9/11. And basically it was the shoot to kill program that said that if it was necessary to shoot down a commercial jet, the orders to do that could only be given by certain generals or the president himself. So that command had to go directly from the president, from the general, to the fighter pilot that was going to launch whatever kind of armament. The FAA had the ability to see that jet and talk to that jet, but the military didn't. So we spent the next year provisioning the military with all the services that they needed to see their fighters and talk to their fighters, no matter where they were in the United States.
And Terry, can we go back to what you were saying about when the decision came to bring everything down on the ground? What was involved in getting so many airplanes out of the sky and onto the ground?
Sure. Great question, Mimi. So when you look at our air traffic control system, at that time in the morning, there were about 4,500 flights that were in the air. And the decision to land aircraft is not something that any of us would have ever envisioned. It took, we talk about air traffic control being the ultimate team sport because we have 310 facilities that are all working in sync to provide safe services on a daily basis. Now, how do you go out and get a hold of all 315 facilities and start telling aircraft they're not going to their destination? They're going to land within our airspace, and that's the bottom line. So we mapped out a strategy in regards to the order came. We mapped out a strategy with our controllers, with our supervisors. They went back and they carried out that mission. So like in Boston Center's situation, we covered airspace over 7 states. We had aircraft that were either going overseas, they could have been going to LA, and we told them, you have to land in our airspace. Those were the orders. And there was no deviating from them because we didn't know how many more attacks we were going to experience, and it was all happening real time. So, it was a well-coordinated effort with everybody on the same page. And to do that without incident, to land 4,500 planes in such a short period of time that has never, ever been done before was just a phenomenal feat.
And Terry, I know that obviously air travel has changed tremendously since 9/11. How has air traffic control changed since 9/11?
So there's an awful lot of steps. You know, when you look at aviation in general, everything that we do today is based on some of the things that we've done in our past. So in our particular case, on the air traffic control side, we have indicators such as the first aircraft, we lost communication and then we lost a transponder. That would mean to us that there's a catastrophic failure of some sort. But what it was, because we lost communication, we now have indicators for the controllers to make sure that there's a visual indicator on their radar screen that shows they're actually in communication with aircraft. We have a telcom that has been in operation since 9/11 and has never been closed. That still is in effect today, and it's a venue where, or a mechanism where all the other agencies that deal with the safety and security of the United States have an open line to the FAA, and we can talk about these things real time, just like we did on 9/11. We stood up that phone call at about 8:30, and it has been in place for the last 20 years.
And Greg, very briefly, how are the skies safer now as a result of 9/11?
I think it goes back to what Terry talked about in terms of, the way we monitor traffic, the way we capture traffic, the way we record the data. There's expectations in the sky of what aircraft are supposed to do and what they should be doing. And they're closely monitored when they go off course. So I think there's a higher level of awareness, and to Terry's point, not just amongst the FAA, but all the partners that support the FAA, that if something abnormal happens, there's plans in place on how to deal with the abnormalities quickly.
Thanks so much for sharing your experiences with us that day 20 years ago.